Welcome to the in-depth look at the Psycho movies. This segment is Psycho 2. This was recorded on September 12th, 2010, on the 18th anniversary of the death of Anthony Perkins. Your radio hosts are myself, Alex Edwards, and Michael J.
But Norman Bates comes home in Psycho 2. Norman Bates, after part 1, he was locked up in a mental institution. I don't think it was Smith's Grove, but it was a mental institution. He was locked up for 22 years under a doctor's care, and after 22 years, they felt he was well enough to return to society. That is the opening of Psycho 2. For some reason, Norman decides to return to his old home on top of the hill right at the Bates Motel. Mike, do you think that that was a good idea for a guy who done all of his killing in this area and his mother's house? I mean, you got to know that it would play psychological damage on somebody.
All right, here's the thing. You have Dr. Raymond. He was under the care of Dr. Raymond. Here's the thing. He was locked up for 22 years. He dealt with, he probably went through intensive therapy to, have the other personality put to rest. I mean, not to say that he was completely cured, because in a sense, I don't think you're ever completely cured once you're disturbed like that. But the thing is, you need to face that. And that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to face it, even though, if you remember, in the beginning of the film, when he went back to the house, his doctor said, are you sure you want to do this? And he said, yeah. Because I think in his mind, Norman knew to truly beat it, to truly regain his sanity, he had to do this.
I think you're right. They always tell you to confront your fears.
Mm.
And he wanted to have, someone on staff to look after Norman. That would have been a good idea. They said something about cutbacks or something like that.
Right.
So that was not going to happen. Okay, well, I just want everybody, I'm sure everybody knows, but Vera Miles, the lady who played Marion Crane's sister in Psycho 1, reprised her role as Lila Loomis. Well, actually, it's Lila Loomis instead of Lila Crane,
right?
Because after her and Sam look for Marion and realize she's dead and Norman attacks and everything else, they eventually get married. He died before part 2 even took place, and together they had a child, Mary Loomis,
right,
played by Meg Tilly. Meg Tilly was never allowed to watch television as a kid, and she had no idea that Psycho was a really big movie. She didn't understand why. When Psycho 2 came out, it was a big thing that Anthony Perkins was coming back to play Norman Bates.
Mm-hmm.
And as an up-and-coming actress, Meg Tilly didn't understand why she wasn't kind of getting more of the attention. And Anthony Perkins overheard her. She shot half of her scenes already. And she said, "Why is Tony getting all this attention?" Anthony Perkins heard that and was very upset. And he wanted her to be replaced. Even though half of her films, half of her scenes were already shot. And he no longer would say a word to her on the set of Psycho 2 after that.
Had to be very awkward.
Yeah.
Because I wonder what here's the thing. I wonder what's at that point, because, they don't usually shoot films in sequence. So I kind of wonder at that point what scenes they shot and what scenes they had left to shoot.
It would be really sad if the scenes that... See, they were doing a lot of bonding in the beginning of the movie. It would be sad to know that there was no real closeness between the two, even when she was hugging him, in the room, and he gave that really emotional speech about
his mother making the toasted cheap sandwiches. Yeah.
Yeah. Just think of all the good things. He goes, "No, they're not there anymore." She goes, "Of course they are." No, the doctors took them away with everything else. All I have left is these toasted cheese sandwiches. I gotta tell you, Mike, I must be crazy, because when I see these really emotional things of Norman and hear this music,
right,
I really relate. I relate to this guy. I'm sorry. I know exactly how he felt when he said that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, am I crazy? Well, you know.
No, I mean, dude, people relate to films in different ways. I mean, there obviously is a part of you that, feels that they can understand what Norman feels, what Norman was going through at that time for, whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's normal. I mean, that's it makes you feel something. That means, that's the sign of a good writer, a good director, because they can make you feel.
Do you think a lot of people felt this way, or is it just, like, more peculiar people like me?
I don't know. I mean, I bet if you took a poll, you'd probably find that some people, had some sort of emotion, behind it. I mean, I know myself that, I can and sometimes get emotional and things like that, because of the content.
Right.
Yeah.
Just some technical information. The original house was used in Psycho 2. However, the motel had to be reconstructed.
Right. Which is probably why he was going to paint it yellow, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe after that they kept the motel. They used it for Psycho 3. The motel was reconstructed. Unfortunately, the original motel did not exist. And I'm sure the sign was also new. But it was made almost identically to the original. How do you feel about all the nods to Psycho 1? For example, when Marie Samuels goes to get a room that Norman offered her, he goes to reach for cabin 1.
Right.
And then he pulls his hand back because, of course, he's freaked out by killing Mary in the shower.
Right.
You love that stuff?
That was a very good nod. I thought it was very good because it shows that he kind of knows what he did, and maybe it's very tough for him to move past that. But in a sense, that's why he's back at the motel, back at the house, because he's trying to move past it.
Here's what I find interesting. If you really want to delve into the psychologicals of this movie,
right?
Does it tell you that our evils are instinctive? I mean, he reached for that key.
Right.
Like, he didn't consciously make the choice. He's subconscious. So subconsciously, is Norman Bates evil, and he has to force himself to behave? And is evil inherent, or is it a choice?
That's a very good question. I mean, you got to look at it this way. I'm thinking about it again now that you're talking about it. Maybe he reached for that key because maybe some instinct within him said, maybe if he gives her that room, maybe deep down the dark side of Norman will return.
Yeah. I mean, Norman's home. He's back.
Right.
Maybe he told them what they wanted to hear when he was in the institution. But Norman, behind the scenes, with nobody around, he also seems genuine. Another strange scene was when Marie Samuels was sleeping in the bed, and Norman kind of has the butcher knife in his hand pointed right at her. Right. And then when she wakes up and looks at him, he jumps back. Now, I used to ask everybody this when I watched this movie would you ever sleep in the home of Norman Bates, in a bedroom, with Norman Bates in it, and sleep there, dead asleep, while he has a butcher knife in his hand?
I would not be able to sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't sleep in a room with Ted Bundy. I wouldn't sleep in a room with Jason, Michael Myers, none of these guys. It's just amazing how she was okay with sleeping in that bed.
Right. And I mean, the thing is, I don't care if Norman Bates hasn't killed anyone in 50 years, or not say that. I still wouldn't sleep in a room in a house with him even. I mean, because even before, earlier in the film when she was sleeping in the house and she put the chair in front of the door, I still wouldn't do that because you know what? If he really wants to get you, he'll get through that door.
He's crazy.
Right.
It's not even his choice. So how can you possibly trust the chemical imbalances of a brain?
Right.
Of
you
a murderer.
Can't. Right, you can't.
So that was very trusting of her. So she
right.
must have really began to love him, which really shocks me of what she did at the end of the movie, but we have 15 minutes, so just another sad fact of this movie. I learned this years ago. The original shower head used in Psycho was supposed to have been used in this film. However, just before filming was to start, somebody on set stole the original shower head.
Oh.
So someone has the original shower head from Psycho 1960 in their house, and no one will ever know about it. They could have died already, and that was probably thrown out in the garbage.
That's disappointing.
You know, they could have told certain people, put it in a locked safety box, whatever, and then when they die, the information will be given by a lawyer, whatever. Let's hope that this thing does not end up in the landfill. So, thanks a lot, Asswipe.
Yeah, right.
Okay, a lot of confusion comes from Norman's age when he killed his parents. One of the indications we get of Norman's age is when at the beginning of the movie he starts hearing voices, everything coming from his mother's room, and he looks at the door and he sees a reflection of himself as a kid, which was his son, by the way, Oz Perkins. He was the kid who, he was the kid you saw in the doorknob reflection. As you go into the next movies, you'll see Norman seems to be much older. And if you do the math, Norman should have been about 28 years old by the time Psycho 1 took place. He killed his mother at 10 or 12, I believe.
Right.
12. I don't have the exact facts, but I believe it's 12 years old. And you know what I like about this, Mike? And I know Halloween has changed our lives. Halloween 1978 was the movie that probably turned both of us into the passionate horror fans we are now, right?
I'm sure of it.
Okay. But the biggest flaw of Halloween, and you have to agree, because I know you are willing to agree on things that are just too outlandish, so I'm hoping I can get your cosign on this.
Okay.
The one flaw of Halloween is that Michael Myers, there's no way on earth this tiny 6-year-old kid would have the strength, the energy, do you know any 6-year-old that can come up to, even a girl, with a knife and just jam it straight through her body over and over and over and just walk, I guess if you want to say he's possessed, he'll have some abnormal strengths, but I think it's just more realistic that Norman killed his mother and her new husband or boyfriend at the time with a drink. He just served them strychnine, and they drank it and died. Isn't that more believable than a little boy running around with a knife and killing adults?
Oh, no, it totally is. I totally agree with that. I mean, if you look at Halloween, Michael Myers is 6 years old when he kills his sister. It's kind of hard for me to, fathom that he'd even have the strength to, really stab her the way that he did.
Yeah, it's impossible. But that's
what
what you say, it's a movie, and okay, fine.
Right.
Whatever. Okay, Alfred Hitchcock did not want a sequel to Psycho. So, this sounds bad, but it's true. They had to wait till he died to film this movie. We all know that Alfred Hitchcock made cameos in, I think, every single movie?
Yes.
That he directed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He was in Psycho 1. If you look at while Marion's in the bank, you could see him wearing a cowboy hat outside the front window.
Right.
Okay. They did not stop doing that. When Mary and Norman first go into the mother's room, before they turn the lights on, and when she's saying, "How about this room? This and that," you can actually see to the far right a silhouette of Alfred Hitchcock, his profile.
No way.
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
Yeah. We think that Marie Samuels is being really nice, warming up to Norman, even making believe she doesn't want to stay with him, just to really throw him off so if you don't know this is all, a whole scam going on, to get him locked up again. Because Lila Loomis wants him locked up for what Norman did to her sister.
Right.
Okay. We find out she's scamming Norman. However, she starts to sympathize with Norman and says he's really not like that no more. She ends up fighting with her mother over the fact. Then, when Norman really starts breaking down, he really just starts losing it. Mary Loomis starts crying, and she's like, "Norman, come on, this isn't mother, Norman. It's my mother. It's not yours, blah, blah." And Norman actually starts believing that his mother is back, or somebody who's telling him, "I'm your real mother."
Right.
So Norman is buying into it again, and this girl feels really guilty. So what really shocks me, Mike, is at the end of the movie, he's coming up to her and saying, yes, mother, or whatever he's saying, "I'll do whatever you say, mother, blah, blah," because she's dressed up as her.
Right.
She starts stabbing Norman like crazy, stabbing his palms, stabbing
his hands got all cut up.
Yeah. I mean, didn't you feel like, come on, we were starting to like you. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, but you know what happened? She was she was falling in love with him, yes, but she eventually got to the point where she just set off that trigger in his brain. That's why when I said he wasn't completely, he's not completely cured because he still has in the back of his mind that inclination to, believe that his mother is still alive, even though the doctor showed him her corpse. He still in his head thought she was alive.
I think once he showed the corpse, Norman might have said that to that phone caller, and then she said, no, I'm your real mother.
Right.
And then he bought into it again. But we're going to get into who his real mother is in Psycho 3.
Right.
Even though...
Well, you got it starts at the end of Psycho 2.
Yes, but, as you know, the explanation for what really is going on was told at the very end of Psycho 3.
Right. Oh, no, it definitely was. But I still like the part at the end of Psycho 2. My favorite is when he's like, he has a shovel and he's like, you're sure you want to have a sandwich? And she's like, pardon? And it's like, dong. And she like falls down. I love it.
And just in case anybody didn't catch on, in Psycho 1, when Marion Crane signs her name, she writes Marie Samuels.
Right.
To change, another point I was making, changing her identity. Just like Norman changes from Norman to Mother, Marion and Marie Samuels. Everyone's changing their identity back and forth, Mm-hmm. Very, very parallel characters. Just so everybody knows, the town was called Fairville, where Norman had the motel, and that was the same town as in Gremlins and Back to the Future. And it's located on the Universal backlots.
Right.
A lot of people don't know this. In the shooting script, before it was rewritten and everything else, an extended scene in the sheriff's office at the end of Psycho 2 reveals that Mary survives that gunshot, and the sheriff says she'll pull through okay, but she goes mad. She goes crazy.
Really?
Yeah. Every Psycho fan, we have to say mad. We all go a little mad sometimes.
So they never shot that scene?
No. Deputy Poole telling us that she will pull through was they decided that she should just die. And they were going to go in and you do know why. Basically because they wanted to they already had talks about Psycho 3, and Anthony already discussed how he does not want to work with her anymore.
Ah, so that's why they did it.
Yeah.
Because if they were, if everything was fine, and he never heard her say what she said, Psycho 3 could have been an entirely different film.
Actually, Mike, Psycho 3 could have been an entirely different film for many, many reasons. Psycho 3 was actually supposed to be a very different movie from what we all saw. About Psycho 2, Mrs. Spool comes in and tells him she was the mother. Right. Now, when you first heard that, were you going, oh, God, another stupid storyline where they're going to convolute everything and just say, oh, well, I'm your mother, that's how this happened, blah, 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 and all of a sudden the classic Mrs. Bates is just a wacky chick? Like,
no,
were you pissed off?
No, you know what I thought? I thought it was very clever because then that explains that Mary and her mother really weren't doing the killing, that it was Mrs. Spool the whole time.
Well, that's fine, but were you mad that they made believe for that movie, for that few minutes of that movie, that Mrs. Bates, who we all know and love from Part 1, and what we all thought of in Part 2 till that, was just not his mother? Doesn't that kind of... I mean, she was in his house in the window all those years, and now it wasn't even his mother. Wouldn't that kind of take away?
See, not really, though, because he kind of thought that it was, and we kind of thought that it was, but... you could sense that they kind of wanted to add another layer to it. That's all they were trying to do. To Norman, that was his mother.
It was more symbolic than genetic.
Right.
At that point, once they laid that on us. Okay. Okay, do you want to wrap up Psycho 2? Give us your overall rating, how you feel it continued the story. Could it have been better? Do you like the cast? Do you like the music? How do you feel?
I love the music. The cast I thought was great. The acting was... especially on Anthony Perkins' part, was superb because you really got to feel like his descent into darkness again. Like he started out sane, and then you could see as the movie went on and the events unfolded, he kind of drifted deeper into the darkness, which made for a great character study. And after reading the Psycho 2 novelization, now if you read the novel for the original Psycho, you'll know that the movie followed very closely with the book. However, Psycho 2 novelization was completely different.
Completely different.
Completely different.
Right.
And had Norman kind of dressing as a nun to escape the insane asylum and then go to Hollywood to stop a movie about the Bates Motel from being made.
All right, well, let's all thank Universal, is it? Let's thank them for not...
And Tom Holland, who wrote the script.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
My feeling is that it was a very good movie. I was very satisfied. They could have sped up. They kind of stretched out a couple things. They could have sped it up a little bit. A couple scenes could have been cut. Still great. Norman's character, as Norman looks so different, he doesn't even look like the guy from Part 1 anymore. It's cool to know that it is him, and he doesn't talk like him at all. When you think of Norman, if you're a fan of the last 3 Psycho movies, you don't even hear the voice you hear in Psycho 1. You actually have to concentrate and differentiate the Norman Bates of 1960 with the 80s.
Yeah.
As far as character, like how I discussed that Jamie Lee Curtis was hardly Laurie Strode in Halloween 7, she was more like Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
Norman Bates is just going to be different. 22 years later, you're going to have a different way of talking. You're going to be a little softer. You're going to be a little more this because your brain is fried. The drugs, the electric shock, who the hell knows what they did to him? So
Right.
He's not going to be the same guy. So I'm going to give it a pass. I'm going to say, okay, he didn't have the same delivery, he didn't have the same this or that, mannerisms, whatever. He's a different guy. He's an adult now. He's 28, now he's like 50.
Right.
Different guy, adult, different. So I'm going to give it a pass. I'm going to rate this movie out of a 10, I'm going to give it an 8. And I give Psycho 1 a 10.
Definitely a 10. And I agree with you on the... I'm going to have to go either an 8 or a 9, definitely, for that one.
Cool. And I really did love Meg Tilly in the movie, and I'm sad to hear that they did not get along. And it would have been nice to see her again because I did not like the girl in Part 3. And we will get into Part 3. And the mystery is Mrs. Spool Norman Bates' mother, or is she just another crazy person in a Psycho movie?
That is it for the in-depth look at Psycho 2 1982. Be sure to check out the next segment, Psycho 3 1986.